Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel for what is supposed to be and what will be an analysis of each and every potential new Chelsea manager, at least for as far as we know right now, because I still have a little bit of a feeling, I'm not saying that will happen, but I still have a little bit of a feeling that could be a spanner in the works still, and none of the people we've heard so far yet will actually end up being the manager. Now, in terms of not heard about them, that's not what I'm trying to say, but in terms of seriously, realistically being linked, maybe there's still an upset to come. Who knows? We will have to wait and see. A few people have already been ruled out. A few people are getting ruled out and then ruled back in. No one really knows what's happening. All we know is that Chelsea is a circus. Not new, though. So, Connor, first of all, thank you for being back on. I have brought Connor on to do the difficult part of the analysis, because if it's just me here, well, we're not going to get very far, are we? So that's why we got Connor involved. Connor, first of all, thank you for coming back on. Before we talk through the potential new managers, just quickly, I want to get your thoughts on why Pochettino, not why Pochettino has been sacked, but just your thoughts on Pochettino getting sacked, essentially. Before that, though, I just want to make it clear to everybody in the chat, to Milos, to Jack, Jose ain't coming back. I know the bookies and, some certain outlets on Twitter and certain outlets have like, oh, Jose Mourinho is the new favorite. It's just Sky Bet making him the favorite because they want to make money from making him the favorite. Therefore, people think it's happening. Therefore, they will bet money. Therefore, the betting company makes money. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, bet responsibly or not at all. And certainly not on potential new managers, because that is crazy talk. Anyways, Connor, thank you for being here. Like I say, thoughts on Pochettino? The way it happened, when it happened, where do you stand on it?
Yeah, it's all just a strange one, isn't it? Like we've sort of said it. I think it's been going around. Everybody's got similar opinions in the sense of it was just a strange time. Obviously, we just about steadied the ship and just about started to see a little bit of momentum. Obviously, the players clearly liked him, and I would have preferred him to stay another season at this point. But the caveat to that for me is, if it was as mutual as is being made out, which again we don't know until we hear a bit more, maybe. But if it is as mutual as is being made out, I would not give Pochettino more power if that's what he wanted. If he was trying to basically change the model, if like as part of him staying, I don't agree with the idea of changing it towards him, because I still think that after another year, he would have been probably on the chopping block anyway, even if he had done okay. Like I've always viewed him as this development manager in the middle to then hand it over, and I've said that every time I've been on this stream, I'm pretty sure. So for him, I would have liked to have had him another year, but if it meant compromising the current ideas, I guess, or the current like trajectory of the squad that you're building, then I wouldn't have given him the extra power to go and sign a few extra players, because I think it would have hurt the squad makeup rather than helped it, if that makes sense. But nevertheless, like it's still a weird timing. Like I still would have preferred him to stay another year if it could have all been worked out properly, and he would have done it based on just being a pure coach and the players, and just to help develop the players, because the players clearly loved him. And I said that all through the season as well. That's something that I never had any doubts about. That's what he's brilliant at. That was well documented at Tottenham, well documented at Southampton. That's pretty much the big thing that he is good at, Pochettino. That's what he gets a lot of credit for, and rightly so. So that's basically where I stand on it all, really.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because, and I've had a few people, more so on Twitter than on here, but still, basically have a go at me because I lost my mind a little bit at them sacking Poch. And obviously people are like, weren't you until 4 weeks ago heavily Poch out? And while that is true, and while I absolutely understand that looking at that from a broader picture, it looks like I'm the biggest flip-flop you'll ever see. But the logic behind that for me was, a bit like Connor touched on, right? The fact that we got Pochettino in last year suggested that they were trying to do a certain thing. For me, that was steadying the ship, bringing the whole squad overhaul under a little bit of control, bringing a little bit of discipline into kind of the club, I guess, but in the squad, I suppose, and then potentially move on from there. Now, that steadying the ship hasn't worked until really hasn't worked until the second half against Villa. Now, sure, if you look at the second half of this 23-24 season, only look at the year 2024, we finished at 4th, right? So there's clearly also been progress before the second half against Villa in terms of results, in terms of actually making a change that got fans to a point where they could actually believe in it a little bit, not believe in it long term. This will be, Pochettino will be the new greatest thing since sliced bread and we will win the league and the Premier League 15 times over. Of course, no one thought that. But for me, it was just, there were so many moments where it made sense to sack Pochettino throughout the season, whether that was just after Christmas, that Christmas Eve loss to Wolves, whether it was the home loss to Wolves, whether it was the Arsenal 5-0 game, whether it was the Liverpool 4-1 game. There were so many moments where you genuinely could, there was a good case to be made to sack him, and it not necessarily being the worst situation. But for me, there's two problems with the way the sacking has been. Now, first of all, you sacked him straight after he kind of started to steady the ship. As much as maybe people don't want to hype that up too much, I do think, and I know it sounds a bit hypocritical to say, but so how is he only supposedly steadied the ship for the last 5 weeks or whatever, 4 weeks, right? But he just has, whether you want to agree with it or not, the ship was steadier the last few games than it ever was at any point previously this season. And not only that, it's not purely, and I was never purely about, okay, my problem was Poch as an individual getting sacked. I never liked Poch. I never wanted Poch to be here from the first place, and I didn't want Poch to be here long term. But two problems I have with it. First of all, the managerial shortlist to replace him, which we will get to, which I have many problems with. But also, and the second thing on top of that, you can see who is on the shortlist, and that shortlist now suggesting that we're looking for something completely different to what the sport directors looked for a year ago when they decided on Pochettino. And let's not forget the kind of statements they came out with when they hired Pochettino, saying for tactical reasons, his experience at winning and this and that, he's the best option. And this is who we're going to put all our eggs into, basically. And for the first half of the season, it was constantly being reported he's getting back. There's no question about, Pochettino at Chelsea. And then you sack him. And I know, Connor, you said in terms of how mutual of an agreement it was. And I didn't necessarily have time to read every single part of that long, athletic, in-depth article about what supposedly did and did not happen. The only thing I will say on that, he had a contract. So if we wanted to stay for one more year, we could have made him stay, regardless of whether we would have given him extra power in the transfer market or not. Because if that not getting the power would have been enough for him to walk, well, then we could have let him walk. But we didn't let him walk. And people say mutual consent, but we're still paying him a payout. And according to my law, a handsome payout. And that tells me there was no mutual consent for anything. We sacked him. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a payout, right? That is my logic. Because for me, like Connor said earlier, there's part of me that is like, okay, you shouldn't give him the power. At the same time, my thinking is you shouldn't give him zero power. Because for me, no good manager will want to be here long term. Maybe, of course, these championship managers are not going to say no to us. Obviously not. They're going from the championship to fucking Chelsea. Of course, they're not going to say no. But that doesn't mean that they're going to accept it for years to come, that they have no influence on the transfer market. No manager accepts that, right? But that doesn't mean that he needs to have the final say and full control. Obviously, there's very few clubs in the world that is the case, where the manager has full control. And that hasn't been the case at Chelsea for a very long time either. Since Jose's second spell, really, that hasn't been the case. Like in the old ownership, we called it a manager until including Jose Mourinho's second spell. And from Conte onwards, we called it head coach. There's a reason for that, because they had less control. But that didn't mean they had no control. And that's my problem. Obviously, in the end, we didn't keep him anyway. But if you were considering keeping him, but you're considering selling the players that he likes best out from under his noses, that's silly. It's a different scenario into buying who he wants, but selling who he wants to keep is different. Like I don't think it's the same. Like as in accepting a manager's demands about who to sign is different compared to accepting a manager's demands about who not to sell, because buying and selling is different. So that's where my big just crux comes from. And like I say, it just feels like the sporting directors don't know what they're doing, because they were looking for something different last year to what they're doing now. But is the squad in really a different enough place for that to make sense? For me, no. And for me, also, this kind of hiring a championship manager, like a future long-term manager, this made sense when we hired Potter. That's why Potter's, as much as Tuchel's sacking was questionable, very much so, the hiring of Graham Potter had some logic to it. But now you're 2 years into the tenure of the ownership. You've wasted 7 months with Potter, where you didn't even give him the full season if you wanted to believe in like this long-term project. And you sacked him, got a completely different kind of manager in Pochettino, and before he ever got to really steady the ship to a good enough context, right? Like the expectations for the next manager are now going to be top 4. It's never going to happen. Isn't like, okay, never going to happen is maybe the wrong word, but the likelihood of, if we give it to a championship manager for them to achieve top 4, like they need so much to go their way in every sense of the word. You need game luck, you need luck of no injuries, you need, just like I say, game luck in terms of that there's never a question of the authority of the manager, because if things go really bad, how do these players react to having a championship manager? Will they not just immediately turn on him as like, well, he ain't good enough and we're changing it come December? Like, there's so many questions that just make no sense about why we're now going for these. But let me bring up the shortlist. Of course, we discussed some of it immediately after Pochettino's dismissal already, because some of the names were already revealed then. But it seems like we have a current 4-man shortlist officially. Again, I don't know how true this is. We don't know whether there won't be, like I said earlier, a spanner in the works that all of a sudden we come with something completely different. But the fact that there is supposedly Kieren McKenna from Ipswich, Thomas Frank from Brentford, and Enzo Maresca from Leicester City, plus a 4th secret unknown candidate, that to me screams it will be that 4th secret candidate. I don't know, because otherwise why would it be secret? Do you know what I mean? I don't see the point. But these other 3, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that there can't be anything good about any of them. I'm not trying to say that. But there's just 3 small things that you need to look at. Okay, first of all, Thomas Frank, well, he hates us. He's said in previous interviews he hates how Chelsea run football club. How Chelsea do football, essentially. How expensively they sign players, how many players they sign, the wrong players that we signed, how the whole thing is run. He hates it. So there's already been reports that he has rejected us. Like, let's be clear about that. There's already been those reports, but supposedly he's still on the shortlist. So that already makes it even more pathetic than it was before then. And then you get to the other 2 that are officially on the shortlist, in Kieren McKenna and Enzo Maresca. And I know it's maybe a bit of a simple outlook, but I'm sorry, they're championship managers. Like, we'll get into analysis of what they've done at their previous clubs with Connor. And that is going to be interesting and that is important. But it's the championship. Like, there is no guarantee here that how they try to work a football team in the championship will, first of all, work in the Premier League. And second of all, they will even do it the same way. There's no guarantee for that. Now, obviously, the owners and the directors, when having conversations with them, they will know whether they plan to do it the same or not. But us as fans, we just don't know whether they will even do the same thing, because as much as I might not rate them as managers that highly, they're still not complete idiots. Otherwise, they wouldn't have, won the championship and done what McKenna has done with Ipswich with back-to-back promotion. They're not complete idiots. So if they think their own style needs adapting for the Premier League, well, then they will know that, right? But we don't know that. So it's a mess. We'll get into who the potential 4th candidate could be in a little bit. We will get through these other candidates first. And Connor, I'll start with you. We'll bring your video up. Connor has done a very in-depth video about all the potential candidates. Unfortunately for Connor, Michel from Girona and Sebastian Hoeness have kind of already been ruled out by Fabrizio Romano. He did also look at those in his video, so we won't look at those guys here. So please do check out his video for those guys if you do want to. The link to his channel is down in the description. So subscribe and watch that video after that. But before I bring up your video and we look at what you had to say about that a bit more broadly, Connor, what is your thoughts on this managerial shortlist? Like, I put it in the title, like the worst shortlist in history, pathetic shortlist. Do you think I've worded that too extremely, or do you agree?
See, I said this the other day, talking to a few people, and I think if I look at it from a fan perspective, if I look at it how I would have looked at it 3-4 years ago before I'd sort of moved into this, like since I'd finished uni and moved into this industry in the way I had, I would have, as a fan, I would have been in the exact same light of just being like, why are we going anywhere near these guys? This is ridiculous. This isn't the quality. I would have been fuming as well. I would have been the exact same way. I think now with just the way that I've sort of trained my brain to work now in this industry because of my, what I do, I almost I look at things like this in a more objective way, and I go deeper. So the thing with it is I like quite a lot of them. But again, I then have the same reservations that a lot of fans probably have in the sense of, are they ready for the jump? A lot of it is the the emotional aspects and like, will they connect with the club? Are they like good enough to take that jump up? Like I say, the actual tactical side of things, I'm actually quite happy with. Other than Thomas Frank, I don't think he fits. I think he's a bit of the anomaly on that list for me. Again, I think he's a good coach, but I don't think he fits the list. Whereas at least the others, for me, they make some sense. Like they actually have identifiable styles that suit the squad that Chelsea have built. And just quickly, whilst I'm saying on that, because I saw some people putting in the chat when we were talking about it, when I say about Pochettino not having the power and not wanting to give him, like, because obviously my opinion not being that he should get the power, it's not necessarily that the manager shouldn't get the power. It's that Pochettino shouldn't get the power, because I don't think he suits the squad. But if you then go and get one of these managers that does suit the squad and you're willing to build towards them, because that is the type of squad that we are building, a more technical, possession-based squad that will use them properly, then I'm all for them having a bit more power, like you said, a bit more conduciveness within the structure to make some choices alongside the directors, because what they will perceive for the squad will be similar to what the directors are looking at, because they have a similar style in mind. Whereas with Poch and the directors, they clearly were looking in two separate directions for this squad. So I think by giving Poch power, they'd have wanted to go one way, he'd have wanted to go the other, and it would have just ultimately led to certain players that weren't going to fit long term being bought in and would have been stuck with them. So that would have been my worry with that. Whereas, like I say, with a few of these managers, they at least make a bit more sense stylistically for the squad that we've built in the last two seasons of transfer windows under this new ownership. It's clearly driven towards technical quality footballers to dominate control and possession, and that's the philosophy they want to go under. So if they're going to get a manager that fits that, then I'm all for the manager having some extra power, because I do think, as a lot of people rightfully said in the chat, manager power is important, because they do need to be able to make certain twinges to their team to make things work. You can't literally have a complete, just a coach that has absolutely no input whatsoever, because they need to have least
there is reports that the directors even may want certain control on what actually happens on the pitch, which makes it even more like, which manager that is actually decent will accept that? Like any manager with self-respect will not accept that. You could see Poch from like his comments in certain post-match press conferences, and people make a bit of a negative deal about it when he wasn't the biggest fan of, Chelsea bringing that set piece specialist from Brentford in. And he was like, but I'm going to be this one decides whether anybody else sits alongside me or us on the bench or not. That is my decision and no one else's decision. And most managers will have that stance, because even young managers now, they have still grown up under managers teaching them where that's how it goes. The manager is in charge of those things. And okay, maybe we shouldn't even use the word manager. Maybe we should use the word head coach. But even if it's the head coach, right? Even the head coach is in charge of who's on the bench and who's involved with, things like that. It's just, and I get your point completely, by the way, in terms of, like I say, building, like trying to, go for this progressive coach, possession heavy, try to find the coach that fits the squad. That makes sense. The problem is that they did the opposite last year. And because they did the opposite last year, first of all, they now let this squad attach themselves to a manager who they liked, who they got on with. So now they will be unhappy about that manager being gone. So squad morale is already bad again after we've just kind of saved it. Qualifying for Europe. On tomorrow, we'll find out whether it's Europa League or Conference League. But we've just kind of salvaged it, kind of salvaged the squad morale. And you could see by the players' reactions, the amount of face palms. Never seen footballers post so many face palms as the reactions to Pochettino sacking. Like, it's not going to help, is it? Like, if you want these players to take that next step, like, I'm not saying they can't get a new, like, nice relationship and a great bond with the new manager. Of course that can happen. But will it happen from day one? No, it won't. And the problem is that the expectation is Champions League. And that's just so unlikely, in my opinion, for that to happen this season. And shout out Cyril, by the way. Hit the like button, like Cyril says, and subscribe. But it's just so unlikely that we will achieve the targets that we have set out, that it makes the whole hiring of Pochettino in the first place completely pointless. You should have just hired whoever, that type of manager, last year. Fair enough, they got Potter wrong. Even if in hindsight they probably think we would have been best off had we just kept Potter, because Potter kind of fits in this kind of mold of manager that we're looking at now. But he actually had Premier League experience, unlike Maresca or McKenna. Obviously, Thomas Frank does. But, so that just makes the whole thing. It's like, okay, you hired the wrong manager last year, and then after hiring the wrong manager, you even dealt with that bad decision wrong in terms of you sacked him then too soon. Like, it's just all over the shop. Everything they do to me is just they're getting it all wrong, and that's why I'm so concerned. That's why I can't believe in them picking the right next manager. Like, that's because they've done nothing right enough so far, other than picking a few players. And on some of them, the jury is still out whether how good they actually turn out for us. Like, we've had great players in the past that didn't turn out great players for us. This wouldn't be the first time. Do you know what I mean? It's like, obviously, sure, Cole Palmer has worked, Gusto has worked, Caicedo has worked, a few others have, a few others haven't. But even the big ones, the sport directors couldn't even get that over the line themselves. They needed the owners to come in and actually get the deals done because they were also too incapable for that. So they can't pick the manager. They can't pick necessarily the right players. When they do pick the right players, they can't manage to sign them by themselves. And even when they make a bad mistake, they deal with the mistake badly by making a rash decision then too soon. But not soon enough either, because they could have done it in the middle of the season and everybody would have accepted it. Even the players, because when we were in bad spells after losing the 5-0 to Arsenal, as an example, you wouldn't have gotten facepalm reactions from the players about the sacking because they understand football. They know you're not losing 5-0 to your biggest rivals, and it's just fine, you know. But after you just secure European qualification after you've briefed the public all season about European qualification being the decisive factor in whether he stays or not, it just makes you look like a bunch of clowns. In my opinion, they look like a bunch of clowns. Connor, I will bring up your video now before I start to play it. The first bit that's got to be there. I will get to Miguel's super chat first. We'll start with McKenna. Let me get to Miguel's super chat first, who says, this is where football is headed, going for younger coaches over experienced ones. Excuse me. You see this with Bayern, Juventus, and maybe Man United. That is actually a topic that I wanted to get to before we discuss the options, Connor, because this is seemingly a trend in football, very much so. Like, you can see Jose Mourinho is out of work. Antonio Conte is out of work. Now Allegri is out of work. But they're not being linked to anyone, really. None of those three. Thomas Tuchel is at least linked to Manchester United. But even that is the only one, really. Like for Thomas Tuchel, it seems. No one else is after him. And that is it's a very interesting trend. And I know you're like a tactics head, you know, otherwise you wouldn't be where you are and who you are. But still, has Pep Guardiola ruined football? Because what's always fun about football is different philosophies coming up against each other, and you kind of seeing what works best. Sure, you have teams with more money, teams with less money, better players, worse players, different types of good players, sure. But you had, like, you know, the peak eras of football were like probably the late 2000s, the early 2010s. You had Pep against Jose in Spain. You had Jose against Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger in the Premier League. Like, you had these kind of clashes of huge personality managers. And what do we get now? These kind of robots that all learned to play like Pep. But they don't have the personality of Pep, though. They might know how to do his football, but they don't have his personality. And then can you even implement what Pep does if you don't have the personality of Pep? I don't know. And people say, yeah, but Pep went straight from Barcelona B and became the greatest manager from the next day, essentially. Yeah, but because he's Pep. You know,
he's one of a kind. You can't compare Pep.
Exactly. You're not going to go to some university, pick a physics student and say, well, you're the next Albert Einstein. Well, he's not going to be. There's one Albert Einstein and there's a reason for that. The same as there's one Pep Guardiola and there's a reason for that. It's not just everybody else. And I know Arteta and Xabi Alonso maybe make it look, you can actually do this with multiple managers. But even then, there's a limited number of ones where this works with. So, Connor, first of all, what is your thoughts on no one seemingly going for these bigger, more experienced, more proven winning managers that sure have a slightly outdated tactical approach, but no one seems to be interested in no country. And that isn't, do you find that crazy? Do you find it like understandable? What do you think?
No, it's weird because, like you say, from at least from some clubs' perspectives, you'd think just bringing them in as like a personality, that's something in itself because it brings eyes to your club. It brings there is ways in which you can make those appointments, and it doesn't even have to be tactical based at all. Because like even if you look back as far as Everton when they got Carlo Ancelotti, that was ridiculous anyway. But that brings eyes to Everton. That's more of a move of we're going to get people watching us, even if we're not as like the higher quality that Carlo would usually be at. Like that, those sort of managers are appointments. Like Mourinho to Roma, they did that because it's Mourinho, not because what can he bring to the team. It was, even though he did work like okay, they obviously got some European Cup finals, like he did okay. But I think nowadays it's becoming more suited towards bigger backrooms and less emphasis on one person. So like we're seeing this obviously at Chelsea, and like, this is happening in a lot of clubs, not just us, but there's a lot more behind the scenes. And I think back in the day, like you say, in those early 2000s, it was a lot more based on what Fergie says goes, what Mourinho says goes, that sort of thing. They were basically
Oh, I'm not sure if you muted yourself or if something went wrong. Oh, there you go. Okay,
AirPod. There you go. But yeah, I think nowadays you're seeing a bigger backroom team and it's much more data driven. There's many more voices behind the scenes. Some maybe say this is bad for the game. Some obviously would say it's good. I think long term, teams are just trying to look for that sustainability. I think that's becoming the main thing why we start to see these managers that are like so possession driven, especially at the top level. I think they're starting to copy the mold of the most sustainable models that that have stayed at the top for the longest times, rather than say a Mourinho who was, yes, he did it in a lot of different places, but the fact he did it in a lot of different places, it was never a sustainable amount of time where he carried a team for 5-10 years. He'd squeeze every ounce out of a team and then he'd almost move on, and that would be the next job. And then because he was so good at doing that, he was so good at producing trophies in a different way to most, whereas someone like Pep, he can go to a club and he can prolong a team and even then leave them in an okay spot to then succeed after, because he's that good and he sets such a foundation. I think a lot of teams now are starting to move towards that modern approach of, can we set up something that is more than just the now? And I think that's what we're starting to see. And again, we're never going to know. We're not going to know what happens until I get five more years down the line and we see if it works or not. But I think you're starting to see it with Arteta at Arsenal. I think you're starting to see, it's not a coincidence that the last 2 years have been a lot better. As much as I love it as a Chelsea fan that they've bottled it 2 years in a row, and I love that, the idea, and it's hilarious. I love to like go on about it. Yeah. It's inconceivable that they've improved. They have been excellent the last 2 seasons. So, and that sustainability is what is bringing them to that point. So I hope long term that is what I would also want for us. But I understand as well from a fan perspective that we are known for winning trophies. We've had a few bad years and you can't just wait forever. There has to be a point. The standards have to rise at one point or another. So I sort of get it from both ends of the spectrum, I feel.
I absolutely hear what you're saying. My problem with the idea is exactly going back to that personality thing, right? Because the reason why football has, until now it seems, gone into the direction, because obviously you go back many years, you have your Sir Alex, you have Arsene Wenger, but also you had not necessarily loads, but you had more of these very much long-term managers back in the day. That was much more of a thing. Like, and when I say long-term, I don't mean 20 and 26 years like, Wenger and Ferguson had, but you had like 5-6+ years managers every now and again. That was a thing. But then, and I'll be honest, it's kind of Chelsea that kind of started the trend of the opposite, where you're like, okay, we win something. As soon as you don't, you change the manager. And it almost became a thing of, you just refresh the input, the kind of the sensory overload to the players. You refresh it every 2 years, because if you let it become stagnant and be with the same manager, things aren't as new anymore. And then the crazy bursts of output that we managed to do in terms of with winning cups, with winning a few leagues, with winning the 2 Champions Leagues that we did, there was bursts of getting the best out of who we are and what we are. But the problem is, when you try to do it long term, I think it is like, that is the most difficult thing to do in football. To be successful is one thing. To be successful long term is the most difficult thing to achieve in all of football for me. And I'm not sure if any managers that aren't the types of Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola, and maybe also Arteta is moving in that direction as well. But he was also he was a captain as a player. He took a long time to learn his craft as an assistant, as a manager under the best, right? Under Pep Guardiola. It's not like Arteta didn't do a Gerrard or a Lampard where he came out of football, did his coaching batches, and was like, okay, I'm a manager now. Like that, Arteta didn't do that. Okay, to be fair, Maresca didn't do that either. McKenna didn't do that either. They took certain assistant jobs beforehand. Fair enough. But it's just such a risk. And to me, I understand that it's just from a sustainability perspective and not from an environmental sustainability, but in terms of a financial sustainability perspective, there is logic to it, absolutely. But like you said, there is no proof whether anyone but these few special people can achieve that. And it's a risky game to play it to find out. Chelsea shouldn't be the kind of club where you find out whether they've got it. That's the problem. They're turning us into a club where we get people where we find out are they good enough or not. And we tried it once with Potter and it failed hard. And now we went to Poch for a season and now we're doing it again. What are we going to do when this doesn't work? Are we going to go to Poch again? Or someone like Poch? Or are we then going to try, if we say we theoretically get McKenna now, if McKenna doesn't work, next time we'll get Maresca. Is that the plan? Who knows? I'm still very much expecting whoever the manager will be now for them to get sacked within a year as well. I'm fully have to be of that expectation because I can't trust them to do anything else. And this comment here by Tom earlier, he said, we cannot have inexperience in every level of the club, from the players to the board, and compound that with an inexperienced coach. The best thing we could do is to take an experienced coach. Now, an experienced coach of doing it the way we want to, I'm sure the club would also, in an ideal world, like Pep Guardiola. They just know it ain't going to happen. Well, to be honest, maybe not, because maybe Pep Guardiola is too old for them. Wouldn't be surprised. But Thomas hit the nail on the head. That's why it's not working, because we have inexperience everywhere. And the people that should be the least inexperienced in terms of their sporting directors, because they have worked in football for years until they joined us, just not at the level we are, but still in football, they seem to be the problem because, people have a go at the owners, and I have a go at the owners, and Bedard Iqbali seems to be an egomaniac and a big problem. But he didn't come up with the idea of how to do it. He had some people that have an idea of football tell them this is the idea, and they've bought into it. Fair enough, they've bought into it, and now they're going with this. But the problem is, if the people telling the owners what the best plan is are wrong, how long is it going to take for the owners to realize? Because how many more managers are Winstanley and Stewart going to be allowed to pick? That's the question. And I don't know. But anyways, let's get into these candidates, shall we, Connor, so we can actually get into your proper bread and butter. I will let the video play to a certain extent. Maybe you shout in when you think it's a good point to pause it if I haven't paused it already. And then we'll talk through the 3-4 main candidates from a tactical point of view as well.
Moving on to Kieren McKenna, who looks to be the favourite so far, and he starts in a 4-2-3-1 starting shape. Again, McKenna is another manager that has some of those 4-2-4 principles of the Zerbi, with the wingers staying nice and high to pin the defensive line, and the other two, so the strike, usually for De Zerbi, it would be the striker and the 10, but for McKenna, it seems to be the left wing and the 10 that drop in to make that box midfield. McKenna is a very dynamic coach and he's proactive. He's willing to make changes to get the upper hand in games, and he has many tools in his toolbox. He's not just stuck to one style of play. He likes to dominate the ball, but in different ways and within his tactical framework. He's willing to go direct. His left back's willing to provide width. Leif Davis has been excellent at doing that for him this season, and they've scored loads of goals from crosses and cutbacks from this. They then have Luongo in DM, who then drops into that left space and creates from that deep left-hand side position where Leif Davis has pushed on and allows that central midfielder to create from deep. They've got many different tactical nuances that can be made within one framework. Then it's important to say out of possession, they play in this compact 4-2-3-1. So basically exactly how they start their starting shape, and it is in the same way configured with the normal nominal back four, 2 DMs, 3 across the front, and then the striker. I think I need to go into a lot more detail. I think I'm going to do a big deep dive video on McKenna because I think there's just so much to get into with him, and especially because he is actually the current favourite according to a lot of sources. How this team could be formed under McKenna, again, you get that Enzo and Caicedo pivot. I think
I just go back to the previous screen so we can read this as well. So where do you stand on it? Obviously, I've seen Nick Nack here in the chat say McKenna is favourite for the Brighton and Man United jobs and second favourite for the Chelsea job. I'm not sure where you've come with second favourite for us, but that's another problem. Seemingly other places want him too. If I'm him, do I pick Chelsea over these other two options? I don't know. I think I would probably pick us over United in his case, because if he goes to United, they will just say, we've just come with an assistant, which obviously is the kind of applies to us too, but he was their assistant, right? And he wasn't their assistant when they've been particularly successful. I think, I'm not sure if he joined with Jose initially or during his tenure, but he's been there with Jose, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and am I forgetting someone? Or the beginning of Ten Hag, maybe?
I think it was those two. I think it was
Jose. Okay, I thought I read 3, but I can't remember who.
It was in the he was with the 18s for Spurs as well.
Okay, there you go. Well, brilliant. Another Spurs guy. Don't I love that? But yeah, this is a tough one now, but like tactically and from everything you've gathered about him, like how much do you like him? And maybe give me that from a 1 to 10, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? It's if I was giving it as an overall picture, I'd probably have to say like a 7 because I have to. I would be wrong to not even take into account the backlash that will come from the fact that he's a Championship manager essentially, and the fact that it will be his first Premier League job properly. Like again, he's been an assistant, but to be a head coach at a top Premiership side, I'm calling us top still because we are in terms of esteem.
Came 6th.
Yeah,
6th,
there you go. But I think you have to take that into account. I'll be silly not to at least mention that with these managers. But then if I'm talking tactically, I do genuinely think he's got pretty much everything that we're looking for in the sense of he'll change. And this is something that a lot of people lost patience with Poch, is he is very proactive. People will love this about him. If he ends up coming, that's the one thing that I'm going to stress all summer, is people will fall in love with the fact that he is not stubborn, because some people don't like that about certain coaches. He will change things and he will assess the team based on what they've got. He'll make sure players are played in their exact, like the positions that suit them to a T. So like I said earlier as well, when that video was playing, their left centre defensive mid, which is Longo for Ipswich, drops into that sort of left centre back position to pick up the ball and create. That's Enzo's perfect role. So already there you've got that. Then
see, that was interesting. I can actually quickly jump in on that because what I've read on a few things on Twitter in terms of, I think Pice was talking to an Ipswich fan and what that person said. And also what I've seen another few people say is that McKenna's style doesn't really lend him itself in general too nicely to someone like Enzo, or Enzo is not like any of the players he's had at Ipswich, which obviously that is a whole different issue. Yeah. That's not even an issue. They just have a different squad to we do. It's just that's football. But you've just said, okay, there is actually a perfect position for Enzo there. So where do you stand on that? And why do you think some Ipswich fans, for example, have said that they don't really see how Enzo works in the system? And also, I've read that he very much likes to play quite vertically, which to me reminds me very much of Poch. I'm not saying everything he does is like Poch, but they're trying to play vertically is hints Poch at me, and not necessarily possession dominated, possession heavy, which they supposedly want, which that's why it confuses me. Not necessarily that I like it or dislike it, but it's just they say they want possession heavy manager that, you know, knows how to dominate games offensively, defensively, and still win and score and not, you know, ruin themselves defensively. And that's not what McKenna seems to be, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, he's like I say, he's less stubborn in terms of the having to stick to one style with dominating possession, but he very much does want his team to keep the ball. And they will, very much like Zerbi, for example, they'll look to draw and drag the opposition team into your half before them playing vertical. Whereas I think the thing with Poch was it's always high tempo, and it was as soon as you get the ball, it's almost look forward straight away. Whereas what McKenna does instill is he does want his players to slow the tempo down and then burst. Whereas, like I said, Poch for me was all the time it was a bit too chaotic. It was a bit too fast, and it just didn't allow. Yeah.
How can that work if the opponent don't let them drag you out? Sorry, don't let you drag them out. Then what?
Yeah. And this is another, I can sort of talk about Zerbi in that sense as well, because he's similar. Like a lot of people say that with him. It's how can it work if they don't do what you want them to do? They don't drag out and that you don't allow you. But then what you've essentially got then is they're giving you the game. They're giving you the control that you want. So if they're not going to do that, then you then slowly progress the ball up the pitch, and you end up with a scenario where you're playing attack v defense in their half. And that's when it starts to become, how good's your rest defense? Can you keep sustained possession in their half? Zerbi at Brighton, not been good enough because the players there aren't good enough. Ipswich has been okay in the Championship, their rest defence, but again, if they're in the Prem, that would have hurt them because the personnel's not good enough. At Chelsea, I think it is. I think you quite clearly, especially if you make one centre-back sign-in, I think you can have a very strong rest defence if you're playing that way. So you then get to the point where you're playing in the opponent's half, and then that's when you start to look at McKenna, who is, for example, he's a cross-heavy coach. He likes his fullbacks to get forward, cross the ball. He likes his wingers to be able to go 1v1, cross the ball. So then if you're going to get a striker that can deal with that, an Osimhen, for example, you've got that as a weapon. Then you've got the likes of Cole Palmer and Kunku. Again, they're becoming 10s in this system because one of the fullbacks pushes on. So you'd have Palmer and Nkunku as basically double 10s in possession. They're the players that change games, that you're giving them the freedom to unlock games. And if you're so possession based that you're in the opposition half and Palmer gets 4 or 5 shots and Kunku gets 2 or 3 shots, Palmer's got free range to roam, pick up the ball and create things. And that's like his role. In a similar way to De Bruyne is able to do that at City because they have so much possession. He can just dot himself around, put balls into the box, shoot. He can do everything. By doing that and sustaining possession, that's how you kill off games. And again, we had troubles against low blocks at times. But I think it was because we didn't slowly progress up enough. We used to just go so gung-ho, even when teams were giving us the game, that it never quite stabilized that we was playing in their half attack v defense. It always kept coming back and then we'd have to rebuild, and it just didn't quite flow for me with Poch. And then in the past, I don't think we've quite had the tools. But if you're going off of what we've seen this season, you've got Palmer, who's been absolutely extraordinary. Then you've got Nkunku, who we've barely seen, but we know he can do this. Carney. If you then go and sign a box dominant striker, which is something we've been missing for years, so that then crossing becomes an aspect too. Because for me, that's one of the biggest pieces that you need to add to this team is add a box dominant striker that can give you crossing options, and all of a sudden you've got pretty much places you can hurt teams from everywhere. You've got shooters, you've got carriers, you've got box dominant, like aggressive bullies. Like I think that's what you need to add to this team. But that's why I like the idea of these coaches, that they start with the options of trying to dominate from the back, but they're willing to go vertical if it suits, because then you can switch between the two, and whichever's suiting the game more at that time, that will then play into it. So like McKenna in that way is quite like Zerbi, and that's something I like about him.
So when you say he's like the Serb in that sense, when the opponent doesn't get dragged out and they just refuse to press, because this wouldn't be the first time Chelsea experiencing this. I'm very much thinking of Sarri's season, for example. We were very possession heavy and teams just stopped pressing us. And when teams did press us, we usually destroyed them. The only way they sometimes managed to have a problem with us is when they man-marked Jorginho out of the game, and then we didn't really know how to build up. But as long as we still managed to make our build-up happen, we destroyed teams if they pressed us. But if they didn't press us, once we got to the final third, it was either Hazard does something on his own, or we don't manage to break them down and somehow bottle it. And then that was also, I would say, very much a theme under Thomas Tuchel, where we were very patient in our build-up, where we often passed it around the back three, often passed it around the 2 midfielders, often passed it around the 2 wing-backs. And then once we get to the final third, where the opponents were parking the bus, we didn't really know what to do. Now, sure, you said we didn't have the tools, and now we have better tools. Maybe I'll give you that, but I still think there's a little bit of that's nice to say now, but we've not had that proven to us yet. Like that may be the case, but I don't think there's proof for that yet. So if we come up against low blocks, and again, this is not low blocks of the Championship, this is Premier League level low blocks. Does McKenna have a plan to break that down then, other than crossing? Or is he then one of these managers that in the final third says to his talented attacking players, figure it out? Because if that's what he does, then he's no different to Poch, Jose, or any of the others in the attacking third when breaking down a low block.
I think the important thing with that is Pep's like this too, because like people will say it, but what you're trying to create is you're creating the base is what gives you the chances to break down low blocks, and then what you're then giving your attackers the chance to do is, like you said, it's not against Championship low blocks, but it's also not with Championship quality players. These are top end Premiership players. So these players,
defending is easier than attacking. Ask Bayern Munich. Do you know what I mean? About our Champions League final there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. That's the thing. Like, it does come to the point of, do you trust the players and will they make things happen? And it isn't like how Poch said it. It isn't to that degree of, we're going to give Palmer the ball and we're going to just make something happen. We're going to let him do something. There will still be structures and there will still be things. But something, again, with McKenna that I like about him is he's, like I said, he's proactive. If something's not working, he'll make a sub. If you've got them pinned in their half and balls into the box aren't working, right, we'll take off that striker, we'll bring in more of a false 9, we'll play more of a 4 across the front, 2, like the 10 will basically join the striker, we'll play 2 up top, 2 on the wing, and he'll start to double up in certain areas. He's proactive. He's not just going to let the game ride out with something that's not working, which I think a lot of people will love about him, because fans get it all the time. You sit watching a game and you're like, oh, this just isn't working. Why are we still persisting with this? He won't do that. He will change things.
But when you say he will change things, will he change personnel, or will he change them drastically? Okay, do something different now. And if he does do that, how long does that take for him to implement, right? If he joins as a new manager, he first has to teach the squad his base idea. And then how long does it take until he has even the time on the training pitch to teach them a second idea or a third idea? Like, how long does that take to actually be able to implement it? And that's again where my point comes from. If the expectation next season is top 4, how on earth is a manager like McKenna supposed to pull that off? Like, if we did get McKenna, and I'll bring a tweet up by Pice where that is a little bit less likely now, seemingly anyway, we'll get to it. But if we do get McKenna, I'm not going to be hating on McKenna, even if we are bad. This ain't McKenna's fault. McKenna is being thrown in a deep end here, and whether he swims or not is not necessarily up to him. It's more about the salt contains of the water, and the water being Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? It's a difficult one. Josh put here in the chat, and I don't know the truth to it or not. You would probably. Ipswich average possession, according to him, is 53%. First of all, is that true? And second of all, doesn't that go against the idea that he is possession heavy and that he fits what the club actually are apparently, according to media briefs, looking for?
Yeah, and that one, that's true, and two, that's something I agree with. But which is again, that's something that confuses me slightly. But at the same time, it's because so many teams in the Championship, especially because Ipswich were newly promoted, they weren't a team that had been there the whole time. Teams are falling for that bait, which means they don't have to keep the ball as much in their own half, because most teams are still falling for that bait. Towards the end of the season, it started to wear off a bit, but they didn't need to dominate as much possession to make their philosophy work. Whereas towards the end, they started to keep it a little bit more. But again, there's some games where he'll change it and he will go a bit more defensive. I looked the other day, there was one game where he had 35% possession. So in that sense, it does go against it, because he's willing to adapt and make changes, and he won't always stick to it. Whereas, say, an Enzo Maresca, who we'll talk about, he will stick. He wants possession all the time, no matter who you're against, playing against City, playing against Crawley Town, he wants possession, and like that's that. Whereas McKenna will adapt. So I think it does slightly go against the brief, but I do still think McKenna is a possession first coach, and you'd see those numbers go up with, one, a better group of players, two, a team that gets figured out probably a bit quicker, in the sense of teams aren't always, against Chelsea especially, teams aren't just going to press Chelsea because they know what these sort of players can do. They'll hurt you. So then that's when you then start to keep the ball a bit more. Those possession numbers go up, and then it becomes, like I said earlier, about sustaining pressure, beating low blocks, etc. So I do agree with what like Josh is saying. It does slightly go against the briefs, but I think the main thing to take into account is he is still, whether those possession numbers say 53% or 65%, he is still a possession-based coach, in the sense of that is his ideas of football. He wants it. He wants to have the ball. He doesn't want to play out possession.
Fair dues. Now we have to report by Time Sport that McKenna is supposedly waiting on his number one choice, being Manchester United, and waiting whether they want him or not. Which, I mean, that puts me off of him slightly, I will say. What I want to just quickly we've talked from a tactical POV and stuff, but what I quickly want to say is he's done what I think is most impressive, is that it's back-to-back promotions. And that happens very, very rarely, from League One to the Championship straight to the Prem. The Championship is one of the most, if not the most difficult league in the world, in terms of to actually win, to actually be successful. And first of all, you have a ridiculous amount of games. You have a very, very similar levels. Obviously, someone like Leicester, the season was very much an exception because they basically had a Prem team in the Championship. But usually there's the spreads of squad isn't as big, for example, in the Championship as it is in the Prem, as an example. And also there's people saying, I don't know how true it is, that he essentially got Ipswich promoted now with the League One team that he got promoted to the Championship, plus a few added to that.
Yeah.
And that is impressive. Like, as much as, okay, he hasn't got any Premier League experience, to take a team, especially like Ipswich, who haven't been in the Prem for, 20 plus years, to take him from League One to Championship straight to the Prem, that is impressive. And there's no debate in that. But yeah, if he's waiting for United, to some extent, F him. And to the other extent, who knows what's true, right? Let's not take every report that we ever see as gospel. I think as Chelsea fans, we should be used enough to bad and wrong reports to know that that's not necessarily always the truth. Let me just see what you've got here. Is that still Ipswich? I think it is. I know you've got more there. Everybody, obviously, please check out Connor's video in more detail about each manager. We're now going to discuss Enzo Maresca from Leicester, obviously. Of the Pep school, he was part of the Manchester City, academy, whatever. So I don't know quite directly how many years he spent as being Pep's assistant compared to how many he spent just being a coach in the academy, which is not the same thing. It's very different being Pep's assistant and learning from him every day, or knowing what Pep does, but working actually with the academy. He's worked with Cole Palmer there. He's worked with Romeo Lavia there. So there is a little something. Connor, shall I first play the video, or is there first a couple of things that you want to say before we get into the video?
I think, play like the first 2 minutes, like where it speaks about him, and then we'll go over what I said and any other little bits you want to speak about him. So yeah.
Wonderful. Let's do it.
Now let's move on to Enzo Maresca, who starts in a 4-3-3 starting shape. In build-up, Enzo Maresca looks to make this 3-2-5 shape, with one of his fullbacks inverting and his main emphasis on dominating and controlling the game with slow and intricate play. His teams are extremely technically drilled. He wants his teams to play in traffic. They need to be high-class technicians to be able to play out of the press so that they can bait the press and then find their movement into space, having high IQ players to occupy the right spaces in each scenario for their play. He also wants to find 1v1 isolations for his wingers, having very good 1v1 specialists out wide to be able to create chances from those 1v1 isolations that are formed for them by their build-up play. So this would be the likes of Mavididi and Fatawu this season. Immediately after losing the ball, he wants his team to counter-press. He wants to win the ball back quickly so that they can dominate possession and continue to control the game. However, after 4, 5, 6 passes, they will look to drop back into that 4-3-3 or 4-5-1 shape and have that fullback re-drop into his nominal fullback position rather than being in the middle of the pitch. But the first and foremost incentive is for them to win the ball back quickly and to stay in that 3-2-5 formation and counter-press. This is how it could look with Maresca if you copy and pasted his framework.
Before I let you say anything, Maru said here, what the fuck, back three again. Enough is enough. I think what we have to learn now, what has become a thing in football over the last 2 years, I would say, is the back three, the way it is played in possession, is not anymore what you maybe remember from our times under. Well, let me get just
Conte, Tuchel.
Exactly, Conte, Tuchel. Like Tuchel is already a bit different to how Conte did it, but especially people thinking of Conte, it's not this kind of back three is not comparable to that. Like it's a very different thing. But yeah, Connor, Maresca then, right? Pep school very much, isn't he? He is, unlike McKenna, very even more extremely, I suppose, possession heavy. He's more very in the direction of like Sarri. I am doing the way I want to do things, and I am not going to move away from it until it works. Well, not you, or it doesn't work, rather than moving away from it ever. Leicester fans have at times booed the team this season when they felt they arguably had too much possession. They were just passing around, not doing anything. People are saying they nearly bottled promotion, or at least they nearly bottled the championship title, even though they had by far the best team. So in comparison to their achievement in the championship, I would say what McKenna did with Ipswich is more impressive than what Maresca did with Leicester, just judging their squads compared to each other. And in the end, only finishing on a 3-point difference, as far as I know. But yeah, what I would love for you to do first and foremost, like I'm sure you've heard most people's problems and issues. So maybe if you have something for those people, why do you see the issues that other people raise not as big issues? Or maybe you just do. That's obviously also fair enough.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of the outrage of how he ended the season comes a lot more from the fact that he was being stubborn and he wanted to play in his way. And again, this is normal nowadays in this like modern age of football. Like these managers, they have an elitist way of playing football and they want to play that way, and they know that's how they've been taught. So again, come through the Pep school, he now is ingrained in him that is the way to play football, and that's whether you disagree or agree with it. That's the case. That's how he is. That's how he's going to be. So I think what it comes to, and I think Josh just put this in the chat as well, is that their form dipped due to the increase of missed chances and turnovers. And I think the turnovers part is a massive factor, because they've even said before they continue to play the way where he wants his players to play in traffic, but they're not they weren't good enough. They don't have the players to do it as such. They got away with it a lot of the time through the season, and they do have some very talented footballers at the club, but with injuries, and then I think Ricardo Pereira came back from an injury and he just wasn't as sharp, so he was usually the one inverting that Maresca really liked in there because he was comfortable on the ball. But I think the main thing with that is again, a different club, he has better quality. And this is my argument with De Zerbi as well when I say about him and even McKenna and these managers, is you've then got to try and plug their mindset into the players that you've got at the club. You can't then compare how, this isn't working there because he's using Harry Winks in the 6, for example. You have to then sort of flick it about and think, well, if he has Caicedo and Enzo there, then what does he gain? What does he lose? And that's where like the deeper analysis comes from, I think. But with Maresca in general, I think he very much, for me, suits the squad. I think more so than McKenna in terms of how he suits
more
the team.
More so than De Zerbi as well, or about the same?
About the same. I think De Zerbi, I think about the same, just because De Zerbi he's a more advanced version of McKenna, and he will use like the he will keep the ball more, like I said earlier. Like McKenna, I still think he would progress to that point where he keeps 60% possession, but De Zerbi's already at that point. So I think De Zerbi and Maresca are probably the 2 best fits on the list.
De Zerbi obviously actually knows 3 of the players, which will give him another small, plus point compared to Maresca, I suppose. Now, just quickly, this comment here by Josh, he says he watched Leicester 40 plus times this season. First of all, Josh, get yourself another hobby. If you're watching Leicester 40 plus times, mate, what are you doing as a non-Leicester fan? Unless you're like from Leicester and somehow support Chelsea anyway, then fair enough. He says, Connor, do you agree that their form dipped due to an increase of missed chance volume and turnovers? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say with the turnovers. I definitely agree. The missed chance volume, I think, again, quality of player, but I think they create enough chances, and that was there the whole season. But definitely the turnovers, because they are so. One of his quotes, I think I've got it on the screen there. What you've got up, it's something to do. It's playing in traffic. He wants his teams. He says that in videos, says it in interviews. He wants his teams to play in traffic, and he emphasizes that he wants his teams to do that, because then once you start to play in traffic, that's when
playing in traffic, high class technicians.
Yeah, because so you're wanting your technicians to keep the ball, and that baits the press. It's almost the same as De Zerbi's put the foot on the ball, like so that you can roll in any direction and you can play out from there. He wants them to go into tight spaces so then when you then end up breaking out of it, you're basically attacking in a transition. You're not attacking a fixed back line. So when you do that, you're bound to make turnovers, especially, and even more turnovers the lower you go in quality of player. So obviously, if you're starting at the top of, say, a Man City, they'll do that and barely ever make mistakes. Whereas if you put that at a Leicester, or then even lower, you put that at a Plymouth or a Crawley. I keep saying Crawley, that's like the first one that comes to mind. I have no idea why. Yeah. There's nothing against them, but
it's just a bad name. Let's be real.
It's just the first name.
It sounds like they're crawling up. They're not winning nothing. They're crawling.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's even in the
literally.
name.
I don't know why it's the first one that comes to my head when I'm thinking like lower leagues. But anyway,
those. For me, it's always Bolton. I don't know why, but
Bolton. At least they're
they're not championship right now, but still.
Yeah, but the lower you get, the worse that's going to get. The percentages will go down, and football at the end of the day is a percentages game. So if you're going to play at the high elite level, the percentages just have to be higher. That's just how it is. So I get that a lot of the frustration towards the end of the season was Leicester fans basically saying, let's change, let's shut up shop, let's play a little bit more reserved, and let's just get this over the line, whether it looks good or not, let's just get up. Whereas Maresca, like I said earlier, is very in his way. He's like, we'll do it this way, and we'll produce this way, because it will work if we do this right. Because he knows that his style of football is good, and he's almost saying, if you do this correctly, we will win anyway. So he's putting the emphasis on the players. But again, some people see that in a bad light. And again, I think this can be a bad thing, because same with Sarri, as we saw, sometimes the football game, it does need to be changed. And Pep has sort of became that as well. He's come into the... he always says he likes to keep possession, but he will change things if they need to be changed.
Yeah. And he has,
So-
like, even in his tenure at Man City, how many different kind of styles of play, how many different shapes of build-up have they used in Pep's 7 years at City? Like, countless different ones. Pretty much every year he comes up with something new, really, which is one of the most impressive things about Pep, really, that he's not like, I will stick to my way and that is my way. Like, Sarri has essentially played the same way for 10 years now. That has never happened to Pep, which is one of the things that makes Pep as impressive as he is. Now, Connor, I asked you earlier in terms of rating McKenna. You gave it a 7 out of 10. On that same scale, where would you put Maresca?
I would probably go 7.5, just because I think that extra, again, similar issues that I had raised with McKenna. I think you have to take on, can he handle that pressure? The backlash is going to come. That if it first hits, people are going to turn on him. When it first goes wrong, that will happen. That's inevitable in my opinion. But as I did say, the extra 0.5 for me above McKenna comes from the fact that I think he really suits the players, and the fact that he wants his.
And he seemingly doesn't want United over us. That helps.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Like, man, now that we know McKenna wants United supposedly, and that does come out. Players, if it ends up that United just don't want him and then we get him, that's already something to hit him with. That's already something on the hitting block, because, again, like with Pochettino when he came, everybody knew he's from Tottenham. That's that. So you've already got that on him. So now if McKenna comes, you've already got, but you wanted United, you didn't want Chelsea. So you've already got that.
Even if the report, it could be wrong. The report is out there now, so people will use it, whether it's true or not.
Yeah,
now,
it's ammunition.
Go on. No.
I was just going to say it's ammunition. That's what I was trying to look for the word. Yeah.
Exactly. It is true. Vic says here, Maresca is the best option because he has failed before at Parma. McKenna won't know how to manage a crisis. Maresca always got the Pep factor. That is one of the things. Now, I don't know necessarily to what extent Maresca failed at Parma. You would know, Connor. But that is one of the big things that I worry about with these young managers. They haven't experienced crisis. And I guarantee, no matter who the manager will be, there will be periods of the season where it won't go well. Now, you can see this season, we were only 5 points off fourth in the end. So even with periods of crisis in a season, theoretically, if there's one or two like Spurs, like United, that do kind of, not play to the level that they could, let's say, then there is maybe that fourth spot behind City, Arsenal, and Liverpool is potentially, and obviously we have to see what Liverpool even are like under Arne Slot next season. There is that fourth point potentially still available. But I guarantee it's not going to be without any crisis. And exactly what you just touched on, Connor, in those moments of crisis is when these negative issues will be brought up by the fans, by the media, in terms of lack of experience, in terms of, like, for Maresca, it will be a lack of, like, adaptability. Because remember, for Sarri, Chelsea fans despised him doing the same thing every game. That is, like, we still meme about Kovacic coming on for Barkley or Barkley coming on for Kovacic in the 70th minute every single week, every single game. Like, we still joke about that. And Maresca will be that. I'm not sure if he necessarily makes the same sub every game, but along those lines, stubborn, always the same way. Chelsea fans don't like that. Chelsea fans like it if we're top of the league, if we're maybe second, third, but they won't like it if we sit around between 8th and 12th again. And there is every chance that in periods of the season at least happens. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. Let me move on in the video. I assume you still speak about... Oh, you do speak about the Zerbi, not. So did you just leave out Thomas Frank because you don't like him?
No, was Thomas Frank not at the end?
If he was, maybe he was in the beginning.
I'm not sure. No, he would have been at the end if he was. But I've got, like, if you want to get the tweet up instead, I got thoughts on him. I didn't really overly touch on his like his actual football.
Is this on the second account or on the main account?
No, the main account that I finally got back.
Yeah. Everyone, by the way, Connor has finally got his Twitter account back. So please, you can see it on screen now. Please follow him. Connor Holden 00, 00, whatever you want to call it. Should have put a 7 on there as well. Might as well. Do you know what I mean? Is this the one?
It's not on screen. I don't think you've changed the...
Oh, sorry. I thought I was on screen. My bad. So first of all, follow Connor. This is the Twitter handle. And is this the tweet?
Yes, that's the one.
Yes. I mean, let's do the Zerbi first anyway, because we don't have so long until you've got to go. I'm not necessarily, like, the Zerbi hasn't officially been mentioned as one of the official candidates on the shortlist. But obviously there is this unknown person on the shortlist. There is a lot of things hinting towards that being the Zerbi. Couple of things. First of all, the Zerbi randomly, surprisingly, out of nowhere last week. Okay, I'm leaving Brighton. And Chelsea, 2 days after the last game, okay, Poch is getting sacked. No one can tell me that they didn't know. Like, Chelsea didn't decide on Monday and Tuesday that they're sacking Poch. I don't care what anyone says. That's not what happened. They knew that beforehand. So I think there's every chance it's De Zerbi. I'm not saying it is 100%, but I think there's a good chance this is De Zerbi. I think it's also the other names make, for me, from a PR perspective, a lot of sense to make De Zerbi look better. If you're, none of us are going to like Thomas Frank. They know that. They're not idiots. I mean, they are idiots, but not in every sense of the word. And they know we're not going to be happy with the championship manager. So if you tease us with potential championship managers, people are going to be much happier with De Zerbi than if you put De Zerbi alongside Tuchel, Jose, and Zidane as just random examples. If you're going to put De Zerbi as the fourth name on that list, well, then people are not going to be happy with it. Like this, they would be a bit happier. There is obviously also a chance it could be Ruben Amorim. There's talk about that. Sporting still have a cup final tomorrow or on Sunday, whenever, this weekend anyway. Yeah. So there's also the idea, and obviously there was already, he flew to West Ham. He then in hindsight apologized that he even did that. He apologized to the fans, so maybe they don't want to do the, he doesn't want to cause an issue again. So, that would also make sense. Obviously, Connor, you've been on the channel before speaking about Ruben Amorim. Connor also has an in-depth video about Ruben Amorim on his channel. If you haven't seen it, please, again, subscribe to his channel. Check out that video as well. Is there another one who could potentially be a surprise candidate? Xavi, I guess. It's now official that he's leaving Barcelona. Flick seems to be joining Barcelona as his replacement. Xavi Hernandez is therefore available. Xavi Hernandez is possession-heavy. He's young. He's progressive. He's proven that he improves and works with young players. But the big difference with Xavi is, compared to even De Zerbi, Xavi has just experienced a club even significantly bigger than we are. So Xavi has learned to deal with shit shows. And within this shit show, as much as you can talk about La Liga's level having dropped significantly, he still won the league. Like, people say, it's not that impressive to win La Liga. Yeah, but it's still more impressive than coming 12th or 6th. Like, let's remember where we are, people, right? It's not like we're second. We're very far off anything winning. So, I don't know. And especially there's also a little bit of talk that Cesc might join the backroom staff. I think that would make a lot of sense with Xavi.
That'd be unreal.
That would make a lot of sense with Xavi. He knows him, but Cesc knows us, so that could help Xavi a lot. Do you know what I mean? Like, he knows the Premier League. Like, I'm not saying this is going to happen.
No.
Ooh, but that would be some spiciness in there, I feel like. Do you know what I mean? Xavi and Cesc. Like, we would already have an attachment to Cesc, so there would be less fan, outrage, I suppose. From that perspective, there would be more fan liking towards
it softens the blow, doesn't it? It softens the blow a bit.
It does. And like I say, he's experienced the big club in crisis. So he will be much more likely to be able to handle it than these championship managers for me. Again, I'm not saying he's better or worse than them technically. Honestly, I don't know. But he's proven that he can do with young players, because the amount of young players honestly, Barcelona were absolutely in demand. They only signed loan players and Lewandowski and Rafinha for the last 5 years. And all of a sudden, they have 5 of the best players in the world in the team anyway. Do you know what I mean? I don't quite know how they pulled it off. Obviously, La Masia is always a cheat code. But still, Xavi has got to get a little bit of credit for this. So before the Zerbi, just quickly, bro. Oh, shit, it's already 6:30. So I'll keep it super quick.
I'll do a few more minutes, yeah.
All right. In terms of these 3 that we're not going to, have a bit of the video and stuff about, Xavi, what's his face, Ruben Amorim. Interested in any of those? Is Xavi as ideal to you as JC said it here?
Yeah, definitely. If Xavi's in the list, if I'd seen more about him, and if anything comes out in the next few days, I'll be calling for it, because for me, he's right up. He's up there alongside De Zerbi. I think he's perfect fit. I genuinely think. I think he adds, like you said, like you touched on, he's got the fact that he's dealt with it at a big club. I thought he got handed a poor hand at Barcelona, and people turned on him anyway, and I think he's still dealt with it. The only one
that got dealt a poorer hand than even Graham Potter.
Yeah, and they still turned on him, and it acted like it was his fault, and then he still delivered a title on top of that. I think. Yeah. I think he's severely underrated right now, and I think if there's a time to go and get someone like him, it's now whilst his stocks are low, because in the future I think his stocks are going to go skyrocket.
The question is, where is he going to? Because that a bit like Frank, right? Like Gerrard didn't do that bit. Now Gerrard seems to have not particularly progressed in his managerial career. But what Xavi and Frank both did, they both went back to the big club where they would have got the job on the credential of being an ex-player legend. What big job does Xavi get? Do you know what I mean? Because, and that's why I think he's not United aren't going to look at Xavi. I feel like I honestly, I don't think we will, but I think we should. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree massively. I've got a video on him on my channel as well, by the way.
Oh, there you go. See, I haven't even checked that out. So
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing tonight. So I will watch that video tonight, and you, ladies and gentlemen, should do the same. Again, go down below, subscribe to Connor, subscribe to me if you haven't already. But yeah, that will be massively appreciated. We'll quickly play through the clip about.
I don't think there's much in this one because I think what I do in this is point people towards my actual Deserbi video.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense.
And
And then there's also a picture of Thomas
and that was just basically the Frank. Yeah, if you reverse a little bit in that Deserbi bit, there's like that's just a few pictures that like Deserbi makes. But again, like you're looking at this similar like 4-2 build up with Deserbi. Again, a lot of the things that I've spoke about with McKenna, but with a bit more possession involved. He creates those similar shapes, Deserbi. But like I said, I've done a whole video on him before. I think he's perfectly fit. I think a lot of the things we've touched on already. He likes to isolate his wingers 1v1. He'd have Mudryk, he'd have Madueke. He likes to have a very an emphasized view on his pivot and like them two combining with each other. Enzo and Caicedo would be brilliant if you'd have. It's basically Caicedo and McAllister, but instead of McAllister, it's Enzo, and you put them alongside each other in possession. You probably got better in possession, slightly worse out of possession with that duo. But then around him, you'd follow it up with better rest defence players, which Deserbi doesn't have at Brighton, but he would have at Chelsea. Again, he would keep possession. He'd feed into the players that he's already played. He loves Colwill. He loves Caicedo. He rated Mudryk very highly.
No, he thinks Mudryk could win the Ballon d'Or. Probably doesn't think that anymore, but he did at some point.
he sees the talent though, and that's another thing. It empowers him. And like the one thing that I love most about Deserbi when I was doing my whole massive research on him to do the video on him is he's so strategic in the sense that everything in training everything has purpose. Everything that he's saying has a meaning, and he's teaching circuits and everything. And I know some people don't like football that way, whatever, but I think in a young squad, I think you gain so much more than you lose from it, because someone like Mudryk, the main thing with Mudryk, in my opinion, is he needs direction. He needs to be told what to do, and he needs to learn. And I think if you're not giving him that one-on-one coaching and you're not giving him that exact instruction on what to do, he's not going to progress, because I think his actual tool set doesn't need much work. I think it's more so knowing where to be, knowing how to play within a system. I think Deserbi circuits like training will help. And then Enzo, because like somebody put in the chat about Enzo being gone in a year after circuit football. Circuit football suits Enzo more than anything. He needs those because he can then.
I think what they took it when you say circuit, they mean like athletic circuit where you do like mental, like just like you basically do what Poch did, where you make them with a Garçon test and you make them run until they absolutely fall over. I don't think that's what Connor is referring to here.
In high level instruction, so they've got a specific. They know where players are going to be on the pitch.
Exactly, the patterns that we've so many times spoken about are not there with Poch. They would be there with Deserbi. They absolutely would.
Absolutely, yeah.
So before we wrap this one up, or before I let you go anyway, I might sit here for a few more minutes and discuss a few comments from the chat. Why don't you give me a rating out of 10 for Deserbi as well? If you gave McKenna 7, Maresca 7.5.
9 for me. I just think he fits so perfectly. For me, he's up there.
Just to let me jump in, do you already include the potential negative PR from getting another Brighton in that 9, or is that excluded from that?
It's probably excluded. I'm probably being a little bit too giving it too high on that one, because like a lot of the notes that I made around the time were similar. He'll get painted with the Brighton narrative straight away. That is the one thing that worries me most about him.
It doesn't help that in 2024 they finished the table in 17th. That doesn't help.
And a lot of people are going to go for that as well, because like you get so many people that don't like Deserbi. Because
I still think in an ideal world we'd let Deserbi go somewhere else first and then get Deserbi. I'll be honest, purely for the Brighton history that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all the managers on this list, by the way, like as much as I speak about how much I like them, they're all getting fairly high ratings amongst others. Like 7's still high. Yeah. I still would have rather Poch stay another year, because the assessment period within that year could have been huge. Because then next summer,
was just a little bit seen with Deserbi in that extra Brighton season a year ago. Everybody would have looked at Deserbi as a very different option to what they do now.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think that extra year could have just been huge. Like even McKenna. If you'd have then watched him another year, he might have gone somewhere else. But next year's market, because another example is Xavi. I wouldn't even be surprised if Xavi takes a year off and then all of a sudden he's available in 2025. That's another option. And this is why I probably would have stuck with, if it was my choice, I would have stuck with Poch another year, even though I don't necessarily think he fits the squad. And I do actually like a lot of these managers more than I like Poch. So it sounds like I'm going against what like my reasoning, but at the same time, it makes sense in the set because I would have stuck with him, but then gone somewhere else next year rather than doing it now. I think it's a year early.
Exactly.
And that's the
I
risk.
do agree. I do agree. Just quickly, we didn't talk about him in too much depth because first of all, we don't want him, and second of all, we don't have endless times. So just quickly on Thomas Frank, what grade would you give him out of 10?
5, 4, maybe 4. Because again, I like him as a manager, by the way, because I think a lot of people take it wrong. Like when I rate him lower, I'm not saying he's a 4 out of 10 manager. I'm saying he's a 4 out of 10 fit for Chelsea. Because
I actually think, and even as a guy, I actually really like the guy. I know it's weird because I am a Chelsea fan, but I am much more closely aligned with his footballing principles than I am with anything to do with Chelsea. It just happened to be I just happened to become a Chelsea fan, and then once you have a club, you're not choosing a different club just because you have slightly different principles. That's how it works, right? And now I'm just sat here as a Chelsea fan who has principles that don't really align with Chelsea. What can I do now, mate? Shit happens, right? But I agree with him. I don't think we should be signing £100 million players, 15 of them, and 13,000 12-year-olds. No, I don't think we should be doing any of that. I think we should be focusing on our own academy, getting the best ones of those, and then adding 1 or 2 great players every year. That's it. That's what I think we should be doing. But we're not going to do that. And then just quickly to finish it off, I guess I should take this off screen because we're not talking about the Zerbi anymore. The same question in terms of rating for Ruben Amorim and Xavi, please. Start with Amorim. Why not?
Amorim, I'd say probably a 7.5 as well. But again, like the things with him are less like emotion. So if anything, his character and stuff is actually what drags him up ratings for me. I actually do like his tactical.
Like tactically, he's maybe not quite as high as Enzo Maresca.
I think he's tactically good. Like again,
not as well
just as a fit for us. Just as a fit for us, I think. Like, again, I think if you put him in a different team, he's arguably better tactically than other managers that we've mentioned because but it's a different system. So does he work at Chelsea? We don't know. I think he needs more changes than the others do to make it work. Okay. And that's what drags it down a bit. But what drags it back up is I think he's probably the best personality on that list in terms of, I have no doubt that if it was Amorim over anyone else, fans would take to him very quickly.
You know,
so
people love the word aura. As much as I think it's a load of waffle, they do love it. I mean, he looks like he has these Southern European, I guess, the vibe, the emotion, the passion. It just clicks with people.
He's got something. He's got something for sure.
Exactly.
People see that.
And then Xavi
would be, like I said, I think pretty much again 9 for me. He's right alongside De Zerbi. I think he suits us perfectly in terms of what he gives you and what he'd actually do tactically. I think he has got a bit more experience at a bigger club. Well, obviously, he has more experience than pretty much everybody on the list at a bigger club. Yeah. He's, like I said, I think he fits the squad. I think he'd do really good with some of the players. I think he'd turn.
The only thing, I can't see how Mudryk does well on the Xavi, but that's not my idea. It's just Mudryk's bad touches. That doesn't sound like Xavi would even want to start him.
Probably, but then you've also got the fact that he's one of the managers that emphasises 1v1 wingers most. So he'll keep his wingers higher than even his striker. The striker will drop in slightly. The wingers will play pinned up high, and they are looking to get in 1v1s.
Xavi would do Jackson, wouldn't he?
Yeah, Jackson. I think he'd like Madueke. I think, again, because like Yamal, he's so good on that right for him because he's direct and he knows that if he gets the ball out to him, the circuits part of Xavi's play and like the patterns is in the middle of the pitch. But as soon as it makes out to those wide players, Rafinha and Yamal, it does then become about, right, we've got you into this 1v1 scenario by playing our way. Now do something, make something happen. Because we've given you that advantage. We've given you a 1v1 where you've got a higher percentage of making something happen than not. So now it's your chance to do what we've paid the money for you to do. And again, Mudryk, maybe, if he could develop and he was taught strategically to do that exact thing and be a left winger and only a left winger and get into those 1v1s, possibly it works. It's one of those things, but I rate him highly. I think he's right up there for me because I think he just suits the squad again. It would work. I'd love to see Enzo under him as well. I think that would be brilliant.
Exactly, I would too. It's and people obviously they give it for Maresca the whole the Pep factor. Now, obviously, Xavi didn't learn under Pep as an assistant coach or anything.
Played,
But he only just flipping played in the best team that's ever existed under Pep Guardiola. So like, he will have a rough idea. And they both learned the principle of football at the same place in La Masia. So like, the general principles of their thinking, I assume, again, I haven't spoken to both of them, is probably quite similar as well. And again, I think the Cesc factor cannot be underestimated. Genuinely, I was a bit of a moron. I thought he was actually head coach at Como. Turns out he was only assistant. Like, especially that video I saw of him in the dressing room after the season finished, and he was already talking about next season we have to work even harder. I was like, that's proper manager's talk. Turns out he was only assistant.
I think he's taken over as manager this year, though, if he doesn't move on. Okay. But I think once he gets his badges, which would be done this summer, if he doesn't take another move, he will then become head coach there.
Okay. No,
but he has been.
And to be honest, if I was him, maybe that would be a better decision than becoming assistant to someone now, especially assistant to someone who isn't like that experienced either.
Yeah, it's like a pair.
If he went to like City now and was Pep's assistant for a season or two, I'm sure that would do him very well. But from a Chelsea perspective, I think Cesc alongside Xavi would work brilliantly for us. Again, it helps Cesc with the Prem. Helps Xavi with the Prem, helps with the club, because obviously we all love Cesc. So yeah, I think now that Xavi is available, I'm gonna put my I don't know the expression, but I'm gonna put my money on not it becoming, but me wanting.
That's what you want.
Him. Yeah, exactly. I think I would, as of right now, probably choose Xavi, but obviously he's not been mentioned by anyone to be even in the running. So I don't know if that has any realism to it, but yeah, that's what I would pick and choose. Connor, I'm not going to hold you any longer. I'm going to do my outro without you. So Connor, thank you very much for joining me. Appreciate it. Everybody, again, please do check out Connor's channel down in the description below. Check out his Twitter as well. Now that he's got his back. And of course, check out all the videos we discussed, the De Zerbi one, the Ruben Amorim one, and of course, the latest one coming out yesterday about McKenna, about Maresca, and a few of the others as well. Connor, thank you so much, and we'll see you very soon.
Nice one. Thanks for having me. Drop a like on the stream as well. See you guys later.
See you, man. So, guys, a couple of more questions. I thought I'm going to be here for another 10 minutes or so. Why don't you put a few questions of things that you would like us to discuss? Because obviously I know I haven't gone to your comments that much while I was trying to talk to Connor. Any news about the surprising fourth contender? No, mate. So far, we haven't had those, unfortunately. I don't know why. But to me, that it does make Amorim feel more likely. Because as much as De Zerbi maybe at the time had some logic, to not it be out immediately, De Zerbi season is over just like ours is. So I don't really see the necessity in keeping De Zerbi's name secret if he is the one. Amorim, there is a reason still because of that Sporting Cup final and him already having a bit of an issue with the sporting hierarchy and the fans after traveling to West Ham a few weeks ago to have discussions with them about potentially taking over there. So, could it be Xavi? Potentially. Now, obviously, it only became official today that Xavi was leaving Barcelona. But Xavi might have known for a little bit longer. Chelsea might have known for a little bit longer. So that's possible. Any clear reason why Xavi got sacked? Thought it was the board who wanted him to stay, even when he said he will leave. Yes, there is a clear reason. He spoke to the media and essentially spoke about how the club is in the worst position economically it has been in 25 years. Or God knows, at least in the 25 years. And hey, speaking about the red numbers at Barcelona is apparently a sackable offense. Because he initially earlier in the season decided he would leave because he felt it was best for everybody involved, for himself, probably doesn't so that he doesn't fall out with people, and also for the club moving forward. Then essentially the club begged him to stay. Xavi was like, okay, I'm staying then. And then now Xavi spoke about the finances in the public. And now they lost their shit and sacked him. Fabrizio Romano spoke about this a few weeks ago. The day after this press conference, all of a sudden, the president and someone else, they didn't even fly to the games with the team, which they usually do every game. And all of a sudden, they didn't because they were furious with Xavi. And now he's obviously been sacked or has left. Yeah, probably, almost certainly that being the reason, JC. Which that is the only negative or thing that makes it less likely for him to become Chelsea manager. He couldn't keep his mouth shut at Barca. Will he be able to keep his mouth shut at Chelsea? Probably not. But at the same time, I also wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea know that they will never find a manager who will accept this long term. And maybe they're either willing to just sacrifice a new manager every year, or they hope that eventually they will find a manager whose ideas are so similar to the sporting directors in terms of which players you need, which players you want to sell, etc., that then it wouldn't be an issue if you involve the manager more in these kind of discussions, because you have the same kind of interest in the types of players and stuff you want anyway. So that is obviously the ideal world. That's what makes Poch such a bad signing, because Poch would have known that he wouldn't have much of a say in transfers from the get-go. And the sporting directors and the owners would have known that they weren't willing to give that to him from the get-go. But they clearly hadn't realized or ignored the fact that they would want different people. They want to keep different players. They want to sign different players. So that's why Poch was, from the get-go, a bad signing. So unsure about Xavi from that perspective. Will he be quiet enough for the owners? But yeah, I think I would choose Xavi as of right now. Actually think Xavi would be a good fit. Absolutely. Bobby says, don't you think that Amorim will want the same level of control that Poch was asking for? Honestly, Bobby, I don't know. He's supposedly quite desperate to work in a Prem. He didn't end up going to Liverpool. He didn't end up going to West Ham. If he's so desperate to work in a Prem, I think, it's a bit like with the Poch situation. I think Poch was probably told what the situation would be, but probably just thought, okay, let them say that now. If I do well, I'm sure they will give me a bit more control. I wouldn't be surprised if Amorim thinks like that too. And even if they don't give me that more control ever, well, then I'll just leave. I'll have a bigger club on my CV. Hopefully I will have done decently well. And, then I'll get to a different other club after, absolutely possible, Bobby. The question is, do these managers always tell it so truthfully and straight up to the owners when they do think like that? That is obviously always the slightly difficult question, I suppose. So Pochettino is now taking pictures with Salt Bay, so he's not exactly destroyed or gutted. Also, quite funny that Pochettino is going to manage Soccer Aid at Stamford Bridge next week, isn't it? Like, it's kind of funny now. I thought everyone knows about the Barca debt and such. It's not necessarily about the debt. That's not all he meant economically. I think in terms of, because Barca have obviously tried to buy their way out of their economical issues with, the Spotify prepaying the money, and there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on there. Michel Xavi is a great shout. I don't think our insecure owners are that smart. Probably not. Probably more about players leaving than signing why Poch was upset. I agree. Any latest player transfer rumors? No. As of right now, no. We're still trying to officially get Esteval William deal over the line. So that is one thing. And now on the one hand, you'd say, well, surely we'll sign a manager first before we think about signing players again. But realistically, I actually think they're more likely to sign players without a manager, because then the manager can't complain about the players yet. But also, we first need to sell. I don't think we'll sign anybody. Well, first of all, we'll only sign after July 1st, because we need to first balance the books for this financial year, which runs until June 30th. So we'll be selling players between now and June 30th. Gallagher, Chalobah, potentially Cucurella, potentially a few others. And then after July 1st, we will sign players. Bobby says, there's been news that we are linked with Araujo and Koundé. We do need better defenders, and Xavi made Araujo captain. Sure, but Araujo will cost so much money, it's never happening. Honestly, I just can't see that happening. It would be Jose Mourinho. Are you saying it would be or it should be? It won't be. Should it be? Now? No. Before the Carabao Cup final, it should have been. Last season, maybe it should have been. Now, genuinely don't think so. We still need United to lose this weekend, absolutely, in terms of if we want to play Europa League. Obviously, we need City to beat Manchester United in the FA Cup final. Which would you prefer personally, Xavi, Amorim, De Zerbi, or Enzo? Yeah, like I said already, Xavi for me. Second on that list is probably De Zerbi. Third on that list, No, actually, Xavi, Amorim, De Zerbi, Enzo for me would be that order. DJ Zav J says, Amorim for me. I think if it's the winning titles in Portugal, plus he has European experience since we're back in the Europa Cup. However, I don't trust these clowns to make the right choices. No, 100% I agree with that last sentiment, 1,000%. Xavi has also winning experience as a player, but also he won the league with Barca, which is big. I think they might have won a cup or something as well, Copa del Rey or whatever, or Super Cup, a couple of them, I think. Well, I'm not saying he won multiple of those, but one of these cups that they play for. So Xavi has that as well, and there's a bigger club. Yeah, we know Ten Hag has been sacked, absolutely. Who's the mystery man? No one knows. I hope it's Xavi, maybe De Zerbi, it may be Amorim. But anyways, massive backward step getting Mourinho back, surely. Well, backward step in terms of the progressiveness that we had tried to build on, yes. Massive backward step in the grand scheme of things, no. I would like it. Xavi as a player is on Pep's level. Excuse me. I'm not sure if you have way too high of an opinion on Pep as a player, or whether you have way too low of an opinion of Xavi as a player. But Xavi was like top 5, at the very least top 10 midfielders ever. So, isn't Thomas Tuchel executive profile of manager that they're looking for? Why did they fire him? No. I know Tuchel is like, he wanted only to coach, but he only wanted to coach after telling the club, I want these players, please get me them. He just didn't want to be involved in the, scouting and, negotiations and those kind of things. He didn't want to be involved in that. But he certainly wants the players he wants. He doesn't want a team full of young players. He doesn't want to be quiet when he's not happy with something. So, no. And he's also not coming back, let's be real. Wait, Ten Hag's been sacked? Yes, he has. If you're not heard. All right, let me bring it up for you in a minute. According to Matt Law, by the way, he believes Chelsea will decide on a new manager by June 1st. So that is in 9 days from now. Well, 8 days from now even. Where is it? I'm just looking for the tweet that had... Oh, there it is. Exclusive from, I think, who was it? The Times? No, The Guardian. Jacob Steinberg from The Guardian. Manchester United have decided to sack Erik Ten Hag after the FA Cup final. Yes, so that's when. Which is also why, obviously, McKenna seemingly is waiting for Man United, because he's an option for Manchester United as well. You would take ZDB being the Zerbi? Usually the Zerbi's short, abbreviation is RDZ, but sure. Despite that relegation form in the second half of the season, he was living off Potter. Then Bloom saw the writing on the wall, sacked him before he relegates them next season. I disagree. I think that's a little bit of a simple view of looking at it. Sure, you can say that he benefited from Potter, and maybe he absolutely did, but they may have just have similar ways of playing. So sure, he would have benefited from Potter, but let's not pretend that if you lose your starting midfielders, McAllister and Caicedo, and you replace them with Mo Dahoud and some other guy not even close to the level, essentially Billy Gilmore in the starting 11, and you also lose Levi Colwill, his best and starting centre-back next to Lewis Dunk, and on top of that, having severe injuries to Mitoma, to Evan Ferguson, and to a couple of others in their squad, of course, that will have an impact. So while I think it's important to look at and not we shouldn't ignore how bad the second half of the season has been for the Serbian Brighton, I don't think we should say, okay, that clearly means he's not awful, if that makes sense. So I think it's a bit of in between. Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United getting a new manager, yes, but with Liverpool, everybody already knows it's Arne Slot, so that okay, I see it now. From you are showing on Ten Hag. Yeah, there you go. I am. Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United get new managers, and somehow I have a gut feeling that we will get the worst one compared to the other two. But I don't know. You never know with Man United, especially obviously with Jim Ratcliffe being involved there. You never know how that's going to turn out. Now, any other questions, any other points to discuss? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up very, very soon. But yeah, it's an interesting one. First of all, again, shout out Connor for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, it's still over 100 of you here. Appreciate you guys. If you haven't already, please subscribe. That would be massively appreciated. Really means a lot. I think we've essentially hit 18,000 now, so that's good. But I still want to be on the way to 20k. So please do hit the subscribe button, hit the like button as well. It really helps me out, pushes the streams out to more people. So even in future, guys, come in, hit the like button first before you do anything else. I'd appreciate it. Really helps me out. Do Mudryk need to go on loan? No. Now, in principle, maybe, but he's 23. He's too old to go on loan. He either makes it or he doesn't. He's not going to get a loan. I just don't think so. I feel Mudryk needs to start from basic again sometimes. I mean, maybe. Or he just needs a capable manager, which for that kind of thing, which Poch wasn't, but a different manager maybe. So there's a few of the smaller, more positive bits on the sacking. Well, if we got Arne Slot, people would cry how we ain't proven. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be happy with Arne Slot. Would I be happier with Arne Slot than Kieren McKenna or Enzo Maresca? Yeah, I would be 100%. But would I be happy? No. And would I prefer Xavi over Slot? Yes. Would I prefer Amorim over Slot? I didn't go into tactical detail on Slot, so maybe not. Character-wise, I would certainly prefer Amorim to Slot as well. Would you rate Arne Slot higher than Enzo or De Zerbi? Not than De Zerbi, higher than Enzo. Also, I hate the fact that if we'd have a manager called Enzo as well, that pisses me off as well. We can only have one Enzo. It's like old cowboy shit. Do you know what I mean? This town is only big enough for one sheriff. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I think, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wrap this up. So if he's that good, why would Bloom let him go? Well, I don't really know, Bobby, honestly, in terms of like, how did it happen that he left? All of a sudden, we just got the confirmation that he will leave. But like, how did we get to it? His results were pretty bad. And over an entire half of a season, injuries become a poor excuse. I don't know if injuries become a poor excuse. That injuries are a valid excuse even at Chelsea. And then if you have a lesser squad with less, squad depth, maybe is the right word, then it's going to affect you even harder, especially when you're already overperforming. The problem is Brighton have finished 11th now. I know it was 17th in the second half of the season, but they just extremely overperformed before. Now, sure, they might have underperformed now for reasons or no reasons, whatever. But just because they overperformed first doesn't mean what they did now is as bad as people are making it out to be. That's all I'm saying. And Enzo Maresca, the only thing I know is apparently he doesn't like being called Maresca, so maybe don't do that. But I don't know. No, it's not done yet, but I assume it will get done. Yeah, shame Höneß isn't available. I would find Höneß quite interesting as well. I would probably still prefer Xavi, but I would find Höneß quite interesting. I would also find Michel from Girona quite interesting, but I honestly feel like City have him kind of lined up to take over when Pep leaves, I'll be honest. But yeah, I mean, maybe there's every chance we sack whoever we hire now next season anyway. So maybe Höneß is available then. You never know. Although then he might just go Bayern, because I also feel like they will probably sack Company within a space of 12 to 24 months. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, calling him Willian is weird to me. No, don't call him Willian, innit? Call him Esteban, I think. Or, new Neymar or whatever. But I think because he's Brazilian, Brazil, Argentina rivalry, he loves, like, everyone loves Messi. Everyone knows Messi's the best. Brazilians know Messi's the best. But, they're probably, and also stylistically, he's definitely much closer to a Neymar than he is to a Messi anyway, other than being left-footed, of course. We need to get a centre-back from within the Premier League. Do we? Don't know, mate. Cucurella we signed from the Premier League, and how long did that take for him to be any decent for us? Don't know about that one. Especially the ones you could get from the Prem. Are they going to be good? I don't know. Of course, I get here at the end of the stream. Sorry, Shady. But you can go back and listen from the beginning. Me and Connor were talking about all the potential managers and what we think of them and who we think it could end up being. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to round this one up. Thank you very much for tuning in. Appreciate you all very, very much. Like I said, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chels, backwards and downwards, upwards and onwards. Which way is it? Only time will tell, and I will see you next time.